Hello everyone, it's Roxanne McCarty-O'Kane. Thank you so much for joining us today again for another edition of the Phoenix Phenomenon. I have with me Stephen Dale today, who literally fell off a cliff in 1989, 30 metres down a cliff face on Pyramid Rock in Phillip Island. So it's not many people who can literally say they've hit rock bottom, and we're literally. And Stephen is obviously moved on. He's fully recovered from massive, extensive injuries and is now becoming a source of inspiration and hope for lots of people around the country and around the world through his position as a speaker and coach and workplace trainer, and also the author of a book called Bouncing Back When You Hit Rock Bottom. So thank you so much, Stephen, for joining us today.
My pleasure, Roxanne. Thanks for asking me to come along.
Not a problem. So I've got to say that it's not every day that you come across a person that's had an experience like yours in their lives. So
and that's a good thing. You don't want to meet too many people who've had that experience. That's a good thing. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so obviously it's your story is much more than just the accident itself. So I'd really love to see how much we can share with our listeners today, because literally the accident, there was a lot of build up for that, for you on a personal level before that happened, and then obviously post accident, the whole recovery process and getting yourself back up on your feet. So sometimes it's good to start at the beginning. So yeah, can you tell us a bit about, I guess, what it was, or some of the elements that led you to being on the cliff that day?
As you were saying, it's a bit of a story, but the highlight reel goes as follows. Is that I was a really happy boy, loved my sport, loved school, had a lot of friends, got bullied at school, couldn't handle the bullying, turned to alcohol and drugs and self-loathing in order to deal with all of these things that I couldn't deal with. And as a result of that, I somewhere along the way learned that the best thing that I can do is run away from problems. I know that's wrong. And when I ran away from Brisbane, because I was offered a job in Sydney, I thought, well, great, I'll get out of here. It really came down to the fact that I thought that if I leave Brisbane, I'll be leaving my problems behind. I wasn't quite ready for that responsibility attitude yet. So when I went to Sydney, I thought, great, I'm going to start again, and I'm never coming back. I'm never going back to Brisbane. It's been a terrible place for me. I've made a lot of mistakes that I regret. So I went down to Sydney. As you know, Sydney's probably not the ideal place to go to if you've got certain addictions. And if you've got a real self-loathing thing happening, and it didn't work out for me. Within a couple of weeks, I was surrounded by the same sorts of people doing the same sorts of things. And I just thought, well, that's just terrible luck. That's two terrible cities in a row. So I'll run away to Melbourne. So I went to Melbourne, and the story's pretty obvious. Same thing happened in Melbourne. I went to Tasmania. I was running out of land. And sometime during that period of Tasmania, in hitching around Tasmania, I realised that my problems were because of me, that I did something, that I had something, but I didn't know what it was. I didn't have any real insight, or I just didn't want to live up to what was going on. I wanted to deny what was happening. So I went back to Melbourne. I got a job working behind a bar in a restaurant, which is a great job for someone with alcohol problems. And I met a couple of guys who just happened to be really good blokes. And that wasn't my way. I didn't like hanging out with really good people. I felt threatened, which is a silly thing to say, but I did. I would like to be with people who were just like me, because then I could excuse the way that I behaved. But these two guys just invited me down to Phillip Island on the weekend to have some fun, without alcohol, without drugs, without fighting, just having fun being young blokes. And I went down with them. And one of the other things that I learned inadvertently at high school was that I wasn't good enough. If I wanted you to like me, it wasn't me. I wasn't enough for you. So I had to do crazy, insane things to try and impress you. And the crazy, insane thing that I decided to do was climb a very steep cliff with alcohol and amphetamines in my system, with no tread on my sand shoes, steep cliff next to the ocean, so it was black from the ocean spray, and I got almost to the top of it, and gravity ended up defeating all of my ego, and I slipped and I fell. And it wasn't 30 meters, actually. I initially thought it was because the police report said 30 meters, so I just assumed that the police report was right. But then this wonderful thing called Google Earth came out, and it actually says it's closer to 30 feet. So yeah, so it's all written down everywhere as 30 meters, whereas I'll change all of that to be, look, I've now discovered it's only 30 feet.
Okay.
Thanks to Google Earth. But 30
you say
feet
only, but that's still substantial.
Yeah, onto rocks, it doesn't end well.
Yeah.
It's not a good story. So
yeah.
I fell 30 feet down the cliff face and landed on the rocks at the bottom, and with terrible, terrible injuries, very life-threatening injuries. And these two wonderful young men decided that instead of running away, that they were going to save my life. And they did extraordinary things for a long period of time until someone else saw and called the ambulance, and then the helicopter came, and then it was this real Hollywood production trying to get the helicopter to land in that little narrow inlet and land on the beach that was made of rocks. And look, it was a wonderful day. I wish I had seen it. It would have been great.
Yeah, I know. And the tide was coming in as well, wasn't it? Because they were working on you for an extended period of time, and because of the location of where you fell, the tide was actually coming in. And I remember reading from, I think it was Dave's account, that they had to make a decision, like, do we try and move him, or do we just keep doing the CPR and hoping for the best? And yeah, it was an extraordinary thing that they had to kind of try and comprehend on the fly.
Well, it was trying to deal with the tide coming in, but it was also with two blokes who had some training at work in regard to CPR and first aid. But a lot of us get training, but then when the moment actually comes, they thought, well, I don't know what to do. I don't know what do we do here? So I think it was because there were so many things going on, and there was so many serious injuries. For example, I had what was known as a comminuted fracture of the right occipital, which is basically a shattering of my rear right skull. Yeah. And as my brain began to swell, that broke off into a dozen different fractures along the base of my head. And then the side of my head opened up from the back, and the crack went over my ear, through my cheekbone, through my nose, and down to my jaw. Yeah. So the right side of my head basically collapsed. So the right eye fell in behind my nose. I dislocated my spine, so my legs were very twisted, going off in some unnatural angle. There was the tide coming in. I was bleeding profusely. I lost a lot of skin. So I think it was all of these things happening at once. They didn't actually have time to stop and assess. They just either had to decide, either we do something now or we do nothing. And thankfully, they decided the former and started work on me. Gave me CPR for approximately 45 minutes through 5 heart attacks, which is very difficult given that situation, and just saved my life again and again and again. I'd also fractured my sternum and all the surrounding ribs. So as they were pushing on my chest,
I was getting squeamish in that part. Yes.
Well, you read the account. You read Dave's account, and so as he was pushing in, the blood was getting worse, and the situation, he was wondering if he was killing me, but he just remembered that it's better that you do something than you do nothing.
Yeah.
And so that nearly tore my liver in half. I mean, the extent of the injuries was extraordinary, but that's why it's so important to be with the right people at the right time, who went to extreme methods in order to keep me alive. And I'm only here because of what other people have done. So
absolutely. And how long had you known these blokes for at this stage?
About 2 weeks.
That's incredible. That's really incredible.
The joke has always been, if they had have known me, maybe they wouldn't have bothered saving me. That was the whole. Well, we didn't really know you, Steve, so we did it. But if we had have known you, so look, it's just extraordinary. But these two guys, only just met them We only really met each other at parties, and I knew Dave's sister from Brisbane.
Mm-hmm.
So that was sort of the loose connection.
Yeah.
And that was it. And as you would have seen from the accounts, that happened one day, and then all of a sudden I was gone forever. So it was just being at the right place at the right time, or being at the wrong place at the right time. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I guess for you, how much of that do you actually remember sliding down the cliff, or at what stage do you kind of lose your recollection of the day?
I can remember the morning.
Yeah.
I can remember going to Phillip Island. I can remember certain parts of the morning. I can remember being on that beach, but my memory of that beach does not include the cliff. For some reason, my brain has given me back a little bit of that memory,
Yeah.
but not the full picture. So in regard to climbing the cliff and obviously falling and what happened over the next week, no, I don't have any real memories, but I do have some sketchy, weird memories from when I was in my coma. So, but it's also because a lot of people have given me a lot of information that my brain at certain parts says, I sort of remember that. Actually, I do. Most things that people tell me during that time, of course, I've got no memory at all, and whatever they say, I believe. But yeah, so no, thankfully I don't have any memory of that moment, and I don't want to get that memory back.
No, yeah, fair enough too. My goodness. And so was it a week that you were in a coma for, or was it a longer period of time?
It was classified as 5 days of being unconscious, but it's really important to understand that the coma that I was in was not like your Hollywood coma, you know, where people lying perfectly in a bed, full makeup, hair done, and there's a little machine that just beats their heart. Mine was they called it a very aggravated coma. So what they did was they gave me an entire ward, and they covered the floor from wall to wall with mattresses, so that I could just thrash around crazily for 5 days.
Yeah.
And so that was because of my brain injury, the fact that I was also a very aggressive person, the fact that I was actually fighting for my life in a real way. So when my dad and my sister came down, their attitude was, look, we know he's broken his spine, or he's dislocated his spine. My spinal cord, thankfully, is not damaged, so I'm still able to move around. And I had a lot of injuries, but to the doctors, they were secondary to the brain. So they said, look, even if he breaks his spine, damages his spinal cord, even if he does further injury to himself while thrashing around on the floor, we're going to let him do that, because what his brain cannot handle is being tied down. So that was 5 days of Dad crawling alongside of me when I was reaching around the floor, telling me to fight. You're a fighter, you keep fighting this, whispering that in my brain. And my sister there looking after me and carrying around my drip tray, and so all of these things. So it was a very eventful 5 days, and there were some interesting moments during that 5 days. So
yeah, my goodness. And I imagine, even those 5 days are really horrific for the others to have seen you go through. But then of course you had the long recovery journey as well, when you were conscious again and realizing the extent of your injuries and what you were up against. So can you tell us what that was like?
Sure. It took me a long time. I was conscious again for quite a long time, probably 6 to 8 weeks, until I realized that I was in hospital, because my brain basically wiped out my past. So I had no recollection to my past. So I had nothing to compare it with. I didn't think, well, I'm not at home. I'm not out with my friends. I'm not at the pub. I'm in hospital. All that I remembered about everything was being in hospital. And I couldn't speak. and I could speak, but in a very childish, broken way. And if you know anybody who's had a stroke, because I also had a brain hemorrhage when I was in my coma. Right. So the brain hemorrhage on top of the brain injury sort of really damaged my sensory organs. Each of those 5 closed down at different times. It was a long, torturous time, but because I didn't have anything to compare myself with, I think I dealt with being in hospital and dealing with the pain and all the problems so much better, because I didn't think of, oh, gee, life should be much better than this. This was right. My life, and as I remembered, that was all that my life had ever been.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay. And so once you were becoming a bit more aware of what your situation was, I mean,
yes.
that would have been so overwhelming, and it would be quite easily to fall into depression and thinking, oh my gosh. But as you said, if you thought you were starting from scratch and that's what life was, how did you find that balance, or when was it that you, I guess, that switch came back on and you went, oh, hang on, no, this is not, life is not the hospital. Yeah.
It was when I noticed that some of the patients, because I was in 4 different hospitals, and the wards that I were in were quite serious wards. A lot of people never made it out of that ward. And when I saw people coming and then being taken away, or coming for a little time and then stepping up and walking away, I simply thought, oh, that'll happen to me one day. I'll either just walk out of here or I'll get carried out.
Yeah.
And I didn't really understand what that was all about until it just sort of, it wasn't a big moment. Now I realize what it is. I just sort of pieced little pieces together. And I've been there for a long time, and I was very popular with everyone. I think they liked to come and see the freak show, because I really was really banged up for a long time.
Yeah.
Really, really badly damaged, especially facially and in my body. And I just started to realize that they know me from somewhere else. They don't know me from here. And when they were telling me about the stories of who I am and what I'm like and what they know me from, I started to think about this other life that I must have. And at about that time, I actually got most of my memory back in a big rush. Right. So I combined what I remembered with what seemed logical. And I thought, well, how long am I going to be here for? And because that was an endless question, there was no response to that. We're going to keep you here until we've operated to fix as many things as we can, and then we'll see what happens. And the thought was to put me in a home afterwards, because my injuries, especially brain injuries, were very bad, and there was not expected to be any recovery, or if there was going to be any recovery, it was going to be very small. So I wouldn't work, I wouldn't get a job, I wouldn't live any sort of meaningful life. I'd be at home. And so that was the whole idea behind what's going to happen next, but no one really brought that to my attention. I found out about that much later.
Right. Okay. And so from there, you mentioned 4 different hospitals. How long was it before you were allowed to go home? And at what stage, like what milestone did you have to reach before they said, okay, you can go home now?
Well, when I was in my 3rd hospital, I was in a particular ward basically for people with a serious brain injury. That was what the ward was. And the people in the ward were really every extreme of brain injury. Some were fine, they just had no memory, or they couldn't read or write, they have cognitive problems. Others were incredibly violent. Others were very moody. Others were believing that they were talking to somebody who wasn't really there. There was a whole issue. So it was at that place that I thought, I got to get out of here. And because I had lost about 45 kilos in the first 6 weeks, and I was now in a body cast from neck to knee and 6'2" at that time, after they'd stretched my spine and after the spinal fusion.
Yeah. And
I was very, very vulnerable to everybody. And there were some very violent, angry people there. And I was threatened by them physically several times. And so when the cast had set, I was allowed to then go home on weekends, go home on parole. So it was sort of, I could go home as long as my parents could find someone who's got a truck big enough, because I can't sit down. I'm neck to knee
Of
in
course.
plaster.
I'm thinking logistics, yes.
So you've got to lie me down and strap me in. And
Wow.
ambulances aren't there as a taxi service, so they weren't going to come all the way and then go 50 miles to drop me off at home and then pick me up the following morning, on Monday morning. So we had some friends, and then it was sort of like, well, report to us what Steve's like at home. Can he survive? Is he okay? Can you look after him? Because I required a lot of different assistance. And after the first weekend, I was okay. And then I came home, and then it was football season. So there was football on the telly, and there was sport on the telly, and I wasn't being bullied at home. I wasn't being threatened at home. So the thought came to mind of, I'd rather be there than here, meaning I don't want to be in hospital. So when I left the third hospital, I just went to a day hospital for my speech therapy and occupational therapy and physiotherapy and memory therapy and all that sort of stuff for a long time. But during that period, I started to get my independence back. I started to want to do everything by myself, because I'm a very independent person. I'd used my independence in all the wrong ways before the accident, which I call BC, which is before Cliff. So I was very independent back then, and then all of a sudden I'm very dependent on everybody for everything, and that just didn't sit right with me. So when I eventually got home, I started my own rehab to fix everything that I'd lost. And in those days, that was 1989 or 1990 when I was home, it wasn't believed that the brain could rehabilitate. If you damaged your brain, that was it. That was a long time before they believed that in the neuroplasticity issue. So I had 10 years. I gave myself forever. While I'm alive, I'm going to do this. But it took me 10 years to be able to teach myself how to read, how to write, how to speak, how to converse with people, how to have a relationship, how to dress myself, how to clean my teeth, all of those things that my brain had left aside. And I just had to teach myself how to do them, because I couldn't be taught. My brain went into severe anxiety and panic mode. If someone gave me even the slightest instruction, it would be panic stations that I'm going to get it wrong. And so I just had to figure it out for myself, which makes things a lot harder. If you want to really frustrate yourself, Roxanne, teach yourself how to do something that you don't know how to do, and don't ask for help. It'll just. So that was my 20s. So that was from 1990 through to probably 1999 to 2000. Just constant rehab every day, teaching myself how to live again.
Yeah. And do you recall what it was that, I guess, ignited that desire in you, that drive to embark on that process?
Well, I've been asked that question a lot, and a lot of people would like me to give some huge meaning of life statement, and that the universe was calling me and all. And there had been times when I have made things up just to entertain other people who really want me to say that. But the reality is, when I was in hospital, I was so well looked after, especially by two young nurses. Now, I know you know where the story's going to go from here, but because I couldn't speak, I never interrupted them. I was never rude. I was never sarcastic. I never gave them my advice. I just used to sit down and listen to them. And there were several nurses that I knew that actually did the job properly when I needed help. A lot didn't, but there was a select number of people that if I had something that needed fixing up, if I needed cleaning up, all those sort of business, there were certain people who were going to do it properly and do it with a smile on their face and make me feel good about myself.
Yeah.
So I just sort of, I fell in love with these two nurses, but I fell in love with the idea of building myself back up. First of all, to ask both of those nurses out. But secondly, what was really what people had started to see me as was somebody who had lost everything, that tried everything, had no real fear of trying things, even if I failed. And my recovery, especially my physical recovery, was almost within a year or two after hospital, I almost looked like a normal person again physically. My brain took a very, very long period of time. But I noticed that I'm finally doing something that people are enjoying seeing. They're seeing me push myself. Yeah. They're seeing me try and being happy to fail. I just got to try. And that in some way inspired other people, and people started to want to be around me for that main reason. So that's a win-win thing when you're at home alone, working by yourself, teaching yourself how to read, teaching yourself how to write, and people are dropping around there just because they feel good about themselves when they're near you. And I wasn't doing anything. There wasn't anything I could do. I just sort of said, look, this is what I'm trying, and I'm having a go at this. And I went out on the weekend, I played golf, and I didn't do very well, but I just wanted to get back into life. And I think the accumulation of that became my reputation, and my reputation became, Steve, I'll try, I'll have a go, and look at how well he's doing. Look at what he's able to do now, considering especially that the prognosis when I had my injury was very negative. So all of a sudden I was this miracle. I was this person who was doing extraordinary things. And I wasn't really. I mean, there's nothing strange about me apart from the fact that I'm just very persistent, very stubborn. I'll do things until I get them right.
Yeah.
And that just became, I guess, the new me. And I never suffered any depression. I had terrible anxiety, but that anxiety wasn't linked to depression. That was anxiety of, I'm going to fail. Like, what am I going to do? That wasn't depression, like sitting at home and wondering whether life is worth it. I didn't have that until later on. Then that came to me when I was nearing the age of 30, because I had my accident at 21, nearing the age of 30. All my friends were married, had kids, had a job, had a career, went overseas, had great cars. I basically had just fought my way back to zero.
Yeah, yeah.
So when I started to compare myself with what everybody else had and with what I think that I should have by this age and not having any of them, it really played on my mind. It really impacted me very badly. And on the outside, I kept up the big fight and being happy and whatever. But inside, I just didn't like my situation and kept on thinking, well, what can I do? What can I do? And I've got no skills. I've got no job history. No one really wants to give me a job. They like my story, but that doesn't mean they can actually give me work.
Yeah.
So that was a situation that I found myself in when I started to really suffer from depression and wondering whether my fight, and I fought so hard, is it worthy? Should I, all the fighting that I did, is it worth anything? What's it done? It's brought me back to zero. Well, I'm 30 years old. I shouldn't be at zero. And so all those thoughts start to play, and you think. So I just then started to unfortunately go down that road for a while.
Yeah, for a while. So, yeah, how was it that you were able to pull yourself out of that mindset, or was it something that happened, or like a conscious decision that you made one day to, I guess, to switch that around?
Well, I didn't realize until that stage that I'd been suffering depression ever since the bullying started when I was 13. I didn't realize that because bullying and depression was not something that anybody spoke about, especially in the 80s. So once I realized that I'd always been here, the only good time in my life, the only time I'd ever actually really done things and had lots of friends and really enjoyed being alive, was when I had the accident and my recovery from the accident.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to do that again. I'm not going to go and fall off another cliff just for the sake of making friends. I mean, that's got to be the worst, dumbest way to make friends that there is.
Yeah.
But I started I just started to look. And one of the things that had really developed during that period of time was my survival instinct. And even though I felt very depressed and I wondered about life, and there was a time I actually tried to take my own life, my desire to stay alive, my survival instinct was always greater. And would sometimes wait until the very last minute until it showed its head. But my desire, and I thought, well, look, I can't stay like this. I can't be constantly fighting depression and is life worth it? I can't be doing this. Otherwise, I'm going to do that until I'm 60. And then I'll think, well, what was the point? So I started thinking about, okay, what are the things that I actually do know? I couldn't get a job. I didn't have any real skills, but I must know something. And that was the one thing that I learned in my recovery, was not to focus on the things that I didn't have, but to focus on the things that I did have. And not to focus on the things that I didn't know or couldn't do, but to focus on the things that I did know and that I could do. And one of the things that I had learned was that the solution may not be here, but it is somewhere if you continue to look for it. As long as you're trying to find the solution. I mean, like reading, for example, and writing. I mean, the ways that I created, the way that I taught myself to do it, when I first tried, I thought, how on earth can this damaged brain learn how to do all those things again? But the more I sought for an answer and became convinced that if there is no solution, I'll make one. I'll create one. Yeah. If something like this has never been done before, that doesn't mean that I can't do it. It just means that it hasn't been done before. So I started thinking, okay, how am I going to spend the rest of my life? What can I do? And of course, all the negative things, you only hear of all the things you can't do. But I thought, no, what can I do? So I actually wrote down the things that I can do. And one of the things that I can do is I can fight really hard. And I can fight hard for a long time. I'm going to fail sometimes, but my history shows that I've been able to pick myself back up eventually. The other thing that was very clear to me was that along that journey of my recovery, I had helped a lot of people to get their own lives back together. Yeah. Because I also realized that despite the fact that I worked so hard by myself for a long period of time, I'm nothing without the people who contributed to me. The two guys who saved me at the base of the cliff, the helicopter pilot and the ambos, the many surgeons, the countless nurses and therapists, my friends, my family, all of these people, especially my family, helped build a foundation that I could now learn from. I never had to worry about a roof over my head or food in my stomach or clothes on my back or love from my parents. Never had to worry about that. So I had that as a foundation. I thought, well, then it's my turn to be that. I need to be that person who can help other people. And they do like my stupid story. For some reason, people love hearing about a stupid person getting drunk and climbing a cliff and falling off. Don't know why, but they do. Yeah. So I thought, okay, well, then what can I do? And it was at that time, because my mind was always looking for it, I found somewhere that I could deliver that for the first time. And a lot of strange things happened, which I'm happy to tell you about. But a lot of things happened where all of a sudden I was speaking in front of people. I was sharing my story with people. And that really did something for me, because I found that I was able to really assist other people. And I had a unique point of view because of what I've been through. Yeah. And people wanted to hear something else. And most people have either fallen off or fear a metaphorical cliff.
Absolutely.
And so the whole cliff thing, everyone goes, oh yeah, I know what you mean. Even though none of them had ever fallen off a cliff per se, they had moments in their life where they thought, I'm at rock bottom. I've lost everything, or I'm going to lose everything, or I'm afraid of losing everything. And so that's what I started to really work on. I started to work on, okay, how can I create and deliver something to these people that's real, that's honest, that's not just superficial feel good, but is real habits. So I started to create programs that went after my presentations, and my programs led to coaching, which has just taken me all over the world. It's just given me a life that I never could have imagined. If it wasn't for falling off a cliff, I would never have had this life. I would not have met the woman who became my wife, who I love so much.
She
None
wasn't
of that
one of
would
the
have
nurses,
happened.
was she?
No, sorry.
Okay.
Unfortunately, the nurses didn't love me that way.
Right.
I thought they did. I was so sure they did have how they looked after me so well and cared for me and held my hand when I was crying, and when I was freaking out, they would be there to, I even let one of them wash my hair. Which I never let anybody do, because that was the only thing in my body that wasn't damaged. So no one touches my hair. But I even let one of them touch my hair, and I've since got back in touch with those two nurses after all these years, after 30 years. And then they like to hear stories about how someone that they last saw that had no chance, had no future, has all of a sudden come back to being an author and a speaker and living a great life, and all, so that's great for them, because that gives them this satisfaction with when we see people in hospital, they're at their worst, and we attach ourselves to them, and then they go and we never see them again. Whereas with what I was able to do was just say, I'm here because of you. You helped me get here. If it wasn't for you, I don't know if I would have found the strength to do what I've done, to have what's happened to me. So, yeah, there you go.
Lovely. Did you meet your wife while you were overseas or out and about, or did she end up being a local?
Well, because my wife's not here, I'm gonna give you my version
of
the story. It's probably different from the version that she'll tell you, but I'm going to tell you my version. I was speaking at an event, and my wife, amongst other people, come up to you after just to talk about certain things, and she told me that she works in a very big industry, and that there's a lot of opportunities for someone like me to speak to their staff or their customers, etc. And by that stage, I become a real opportunist. If there was something there, I'm going for it. So with her, I thought she's quite nice. But I didn't let my ego get in front, thinking, oh, she likes me. I just thought, oh, well, if she wants to catch up with me, I'll let her catch up with me. So I think I spoke on the Tuesday or Wednesday night. I went to see her at work on the Thursday, and even though I'm convinced that she asked me out for Friday night, she somehow twisted that into being that I asked her out. I don't, that's where the issues are.
Semantic,
so Yeah. So we went out on the Friday night, and we've been together ever since. And that was 2005.
Yeah.
So all of these great things have come from what that accident have done. So that's one of the things I talk about, that sometimes your worst day can become your best day, but you've got to be prepared to do the hard work in the middle.
Yeah.
Things don't just happen because you think they should, or because you feel as though, I just deserve it. I don't believe that that's how the world works. I believe that if you want something, you've got to work for it. You've got to trial and error. You've got to fail, and then find out what you could have done better in order to succeed, and do that over the time. And that, my life has been up and down. There's no doubt about it. I mean, I've still got what you were saying at the beginning, that I've fully recovered. Well, no one would tell, but my body knows that I have had these problems, and I do have physical issues. And that does play on my mind, because my mind remembers it the full ordeal. So if some part of my body starts to play up, my brain starts to react, because it feels like the whole thing, it feels like everything is under siege again. It's not just on my foot or on my back or my shoulder. It's the whole of me has to stop and deal with this whole thing. And then I just go back into this recovery mode. And
All right. And so talking about how you've progressed physically and mentally since the accident, obviously made quite remarkable recoveries across a lot of areas. Do you still find that you have some, maybe intermittent things that do pop up for you physically or mentally that you continue to struggle with?
Because when I dislocated my spine, by the time they were able to fuse my spine back onto my hips, it had been quite a number of weeks, and my spine had settled in a slightly screwed around version into hips that were crooked. So fusing it sort of, I guess, obviously the best they could. They did a wonderful job. I mean, I know what had happened, but that basically meant that my body is out of kilter. I'm always sort of out of kilter. And because of the fusion that has taken place on the part of the spine that had been fused, I've got a lot of issues with that, because that fusion, it's just a bone fusion. It's not, there's no steel or nails in there or screws. But that fusion is now 30 years old. Mm. So a bone fusion that's now 30 years old, I'm now 51. And at that time is when the body starts to degenerate. Now, I do a lot of physical work. I do a lot of stretching. I've really looked after myself and gone beyond. But that fusion area is starting to weaken, which means that causes nerve issues throughout my feet and my legs. And I'm sure that if any of you or anyone watching this understands what nerve pain is like, it's really debilitating. Mm. And it's like a stab. It's not this well, mine isn't a constant gnawing thing. It's a stab. It's a shot. It's a bolt of lightning that goes up your leg. And I've had to work really hard on never reacting to that, which is really hard when you don't know when it's going to happen or not. Mm. All of a sudden I'll feel it, and because if I react, people get very upset of what's happening. And I don't like that. I don't like to talk, I don't like to talk about pain, and it just sets everything off. Mm. So, and it's very annoying when you ask somebody how they are and they actually tell you, and it takes them 2 hours to answer that question. So yeah. I make sure that I never do that. If people say, so the pain in my feet and my legs, I've got a headache that I've had now for 30 years that doesn't go away. And I had to work my way around that. So when I work with people on a whole number of things, it's usually to do with business or life or relationships or getting to the next level or making more money, whatever. But sometimes it's about dealing with pain. And I had to go through a period of forgiving myself for the pain that I'm going to have for the rest of my life. Mm. And you don't just do that once. You've got to do that again and again and again and again, almost forever. You've got to continue to forgive yourself for what you've done to yourself. And the perfectly fit person that you tried to destroy when you were younger, you should have thought about it. You said, well, I didn't. So here I am right now. But it's also understanding and accepting that is always going to be here. In fact, it's probably going to get a bit worse. That's the reality of it. Mm. That's not negative thinking. It's very positive thinking, because it's very realistic thinking. Positive thinking to me isn't denying the bad things. It's dealing with the bad things. It's being able to say, well, no matter what you throw at me, I'll be able to figure my way out of it. I'll come through it. That, to me, that's what I define as being positive thinking. And so when you're aware of that, you think, okay, now I've got this. So first of all, who's controlling who? Is the pain controlling me, or am I controlling the pain? Because my problems with addictions have kept me away from anything stronger than a Panadol or a good cup of coffee now for 30 years. And trust me, there are times when I just want drugs. But my body can't deal with it, because that might get me off on the wrong road. With depression, I know there's a lot of wonderful and some not so wonderful medication for depression, but I can't deal with it. I've never gone down that road. I've tried to figure out how can I deal with it? Because if I have this forever, it's either going to be requiring medication or something forever, which I don't want. Now, that's just my call. If other people think differently about what they've got to deal with, more power to them. That's just how I have dealt with my particular needs, knowing my flaws and my weaknesses with feeling inducing or pain medication or anything like that. So I work very much on being able to deal with those things, which sometimes separates me from the world. I have to go into my own little place to deal with these things because they're there. That is something that a lot of people have to deal with, and it might be dealing with emotional pain, it might be dealing with a memory, it might be dealing with something that happened to them or something that didn't happen to them. And working with people on those things, so it's acceptance and it's forgiveness, but it's about redefinition as well. I've redefined my pain as being my friend, and it sounds weird, but the word, you write your own dictionary.
Yeah,
you don't have to follow someone else's dictionary, and my dictionary says that pain is my friend, because I'd rather be surrounded by my friends all the time, like I am with pain, than be surrounded by my enemies and people who go off on their pain. Hey, look, I understand it. But to me, that has never led anywhere positive. That has never led them to a better place. Dealing with this, it also reminds me of what a fool I can be if I get ahead of myself. It slows me down. It makes me stop. It makes me think, if I do this, where is this going to take me? If I think like this, what actions are going to follow, and do I want to do those actions? Is that taking me to a place that I want to get to? Because if it's not, which it invariably isn't, I've got to keep on this very narrow path in order to achieve what it is that I want to achieve, that I want to be my legacy, that I want my life to stand for. I want the fact that I fell off a cliff and that I worked tirelessly for 10 years to even start getting back. I want that to be worth something. I don't want it to be thrown away because I've had a moment of incapability. And that's just me. I'm not suggesting other people would think like that, but a lot of people want some help with that. So I help them to reach that point for themselves. I help them to reach a point of acceptance, forgiveness of other people who don't understand, but also redefining it and deciding who controls who here. Do you control the pain, or does the pain control you? Just like your mobile phone, just like your coffee, does that control you, or do you control it? And that's one of the things that I spend a lot of time presenting and talking about, is who controls you and who doesn't control you. And it's all of these things. Where are you in control, and where have you given that control over to somebody else? Because if you give the control to somebody, if you're blaming somebody, you're basically saying, I have absolutely no power in changing it because it's all their fault or all their problem. So I'm waiting for them to change everything just for me. And that just has never actually worked out for me. So I think, well, whatever's happened, I'm responsible for what I've done afterwards. I fell off a cliff. Okay, fine. But what am I going to do now? What am I going to do now that I've fallen off a cliff and survived? What sort of life am I going to live now? And all the people who might have bullied me or picked on me or hit me or done anything like that, I think, okay, well, that's happened. There's nothing I can do about it. But what sort of person does that event turn me into? And taking responsibility for that. And if I blame them, I'm saying I don't have the power to change it, which means that it controls me instead of me controlling it. So you go through all these things, and sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you just want to have a little pity party. Give me 5 minutes to feel sorry for myself, and then I'll get over it. Because that doesn't solve anything either. And if what you're after is a solution, then going down the road towards that solution is what I would recommend, and what I work with people on and groups. And with there being so many changes going on in the world at the moment, and so many mental health things and a lack of mental strength, a lack of mental toughness, because life is so convenient. Why should I be resilient when it's also convenient? Then when they need to be resilient, they're wondering why they can't be resilient. So all these particular levels, but my career for 17 years has always been people coming up to me and saying, Stephen, this is our problem. This is our scenario, or this is the change that we want to make. How do we do it? And if I can assist them, then I will. If I can't, then I'll recommend somebody who can.
Yeah.
Because anybody who looks for solutions, they're a friend of mine. I like being with people who want solutions instead of, I just believe it'll happen. It'll, all that sort of thing. Belief is very important, but to a certain extent.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you can believe anything you like, but it's going to come down to, but what are you actually going to do?
Yeah, absolutely.
What are your actions?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. And I think one thing that resonated with me, and I think probably would with a lot of people, is sometimes a lot of this boils down to self-worth as well, and believing that you are enough and that you're worthy of being able to take the actions that you need to achieve whatever goals that you have. So and for you, obviously, with having the bullying and everything you were dealing with in your personal life, feeling enough has been a journey in itself for you as well.
Well, it's when you're bullied, what tends to happen is that you start believing that you should be bullied, that you're not good enough to not be bullied. So therefore, even when the bullying stops, you start bullying yourself because you think that that's what you're worth. And dealing with that whole thing, and it took me a long time to understand that somewhere along the line, even though my parents loved me and I had a beautiful childhood and I was loved and I was cared for and I had lots of friends, where did I go? How did I go from someone who believed that I was everything that I needed to be to someone who believed that I just wasn't enough for people? And that came down to, I think, the moment that I started believing the lies that I was told. Now, if you back a lie up with a punch, you're going to want to, you start believing it. If you know that they're going to tell you something and it's going to be followed by a hit, then it has a lot of power. But it was when I started to believe that the bullies were right with that I'm trash, I'm no good, no one wants me, no one will go out with me, no one wants to hang out with me. Once I started to believe them, my brain said, okay, then if that's what you believe, then I'll make that happen. And so I started to inadvertently repel everybody and everything. And all of a sudden that was evident. See, look, everyone's running away from me. Well, Stephen, that's because you're such a difficult individual.
Yeah. Not
because you're not enough, because you're making yourself out to be that. So when I hear people saying, well, I wonder if I'm good enough, I've got to ask them, well, who are you comparing that to? Are you comparing it to who you think you should be? Maybe you have kept yourself down. You should be at a particular height or a particular level that you have continued to sabotage yourself in reaching. So when you say that I'm not enough, are you talking about who you think you should be? Or are you talking about somebody or someone or some group who throughout your entire life has led you to believe that you're not good enough to love, and you've eventually started to believe them? Then it's the belief that we need to change. We need to change the evidence, because philosophically speaking, your belief system is based on your perception of the evidence. So what I work with people on is either changing the evidence or changing your perception to evidence that can't change.
Right.
So instead of wanting to do all the, the actions and the beliefs and the thoughts and the results, that's all great, but all that comes out of what do you actually believe with the evidence that's given to you. And sometimes the information, especially today with fake news and agenda and everybody's trying to sell you something, you're actually receiving so much information, but how much of that is actually evidence? We hear so much that we tend to attach our belief system to it. But that doesn't make it real. That doesn't mean that it's going to be a worthwhile belief, especially if what they're trying to get you to do is buy their product or buy their idea or buy their concept. So I know this is going off in a different direction, but I spend a lot of time especially with businesses of, do you actually know how to think? Or are you just recalling what you've been told is the truth, or what you've been told is the way, or the format, or the system? Or do you actually stop and think? Do you actually find out whether what you believe in is based on evidence or propaganda or agenda, somebody else's agenda, a whole lot of things, until people reach the point of going, I've just got it. I find most people just seem to understand once they get to that point.
Yeah.
I believe something that has either changed or never was true to start off with, and that set up a whole new chain of events that's got me to this point that I'm at. So I'm very much into those particular subjects, because I've spent my life since the accident trying to figure out, why am I thinking this? What do I need to think to get to a point that I want to reach?
Yeah.
And that just seems to creep into a lot of the presentations and a lot of the workshops and a lot of the coaching that I do, because it seems that just about everyone else is on the same page as me, saying, Stephen, nothing makes sense anymore. Everything's crazy. Well, is it? Or do you just not know what's actually going on? Maybe we need to spend time on helping you find out what's actually happening rather than what you think is happening.
Yeah.
So I've gone off in that direction, but that's because that's because of what I've been through. And I've experienced that my brain, since the accident, and it took probably 20 years to get to this point, but my brain all of a sudden became a super absorbent, because I had spent so long by myself. I spent so much analysing myself, assessing everything I did or didn't do, why I didn't do it, because I wanted to get better. And then when I got better, I thought, well, now that I'm here, this isn't my potential. I thought this was my potential, but now that I'm here, it's not. I can go further. I can do more.
Yeah.
And with the speaking, as you would know from a lot of speakers, as soon as you start to speak, or as soon as you start to write a book, the direction that your life will take is unknown.
Yeah.
Because different people want different things, and so you go everywhere, and all of a sudden you're doing a whole lot of different presentations and a whole lot of thinking and a whole lot of different programs. And when you coach people individually, everybody takes it differently. Yeah. Everybody wants to discuss something different. They want to discuss something personal or a particular way that they see it. So that's what I do now. And it drives everyone, including myself, insane with the fact that I'm constantly thinking of 50 things at once.
Yeah.
Whereas previously I couldn't think of one thing at once.
Yeah, it's really incredible. And so obviously, you mentioned, you're doing multiple presentations now, flying all over the place, which is really incredible. But what are your memories of the first time you maybe took to the stage or picked up a microphone or did an interview to share your story to a wider audience for the first time?
It was a surreal moment, completely surreal, because I found out not long before I actually spoke, when I realized the things that I've been through in my life had always stopped me speaking, stopped me saying what I wanted to say, stopped me from sharing, stopped me from having relationships, from the bullying to the addiction issues to the brain injury, everything. For some reason, I felt like I wasn't allowed to speak. And then when that opportunity came, all of a sudden the floor was mine. And I just had to figure out what it was that I really wanted to say. But at the same time as thinking that, I had to think, but it's not about me, it's about them. What do they want to hear? Because I want to say what they want to hear, but not to a point of just being a people pleaser, because I've never sort of really been one of those. But I don't want it to all be about me, because I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for everybody else. So if they've given up their time, if they're looking at me, if they've given up their entire day or a couple of hours to listen to me, then it better be worthy of their time. And once I started to work on those two things, I started to get a solid and continued voice in my head that made sense. Because as you would know, if you've spoken to people with depression, whatever, it's that thing of no one will listen to me. No one cares what I have to say. Whenever I feel something, there's no one there who wants to hear what I think or how I feel. And that's very debilitating. And being a speaker, I've now got a voice, but I have to be very careful that it's what the people in the audience are expecting from me, even though I don't seek to entertain you, I seek to challenge you. I seek you to stop where you are and think about the direction of your life and the future of your life. And I really enjoy that. And I know that goes over well because of the amount of people who've come to me after presentations, and every speaker will say the same thing. They come up to you and they tell you what they think you've said. And it may not even be close to what you said, but they heard you say something else, and then the conversation is about, tell me what you thought.
Yeah.
And they start talking and they start sharing with you. And eventually it comes down to what we we're just talking about. I can't share this with anybody, or I didn't even know that I felt like this or thought this way until you prompted certain thoughts in my mind, until you prompted me to start thinking about new things. And that's why I just love what I do, because I feel like I'm actually achieving something, not only for me, but more importantly for other people, instead of being a tarantula in the underpants of society, as I was once called by somebody.
Oh, you're kidding.
Where nothing that I did, everything made enemies. Everyone got really annoyed with how I spoke, and you know, there was the tumor in my humor, the constant sarcastic, the constantly putting everything down because I felt so bad. Whereas now it's quite different, and it's I feel like I'm doing something now. There's a reason for me being here. At least I've made a reason out of what happened to me by doing this.
Yeah.
So that's a very extended version of my highlight reel, Roxanne.
Yeah, that's all right. That's what we were after at the end of the day, so it's great.
Yes.
And I guess, you know, having gone through, you've said 17 years of, you know, of your work evolving, do you still get a real buzz when you get, you know, feedback from people who you're working with, you know, one-on-one, or who may have gone to a presentation and enacted some of these things that you've spoken about and seen real change in their own lives?
Oh, absolutely. But I'll tell you the two things that do more for me than anything else. When someone comes up to you and says, Stephen, I heard you, or I did your program like 5 years ago, and look at my life now. It wasn't that I did something that helped for 5 years, but I triggered something, or I started a new thought, or I gave a challenge that they hadn't previously challenged themselves with. And they give me the long term of it, because that's part of what it is that I'm constantly talking about. Everybody wants something so immediately.
Yeah.
They want immediate results. And that's an easy sales target. That's what all the ads say. Apply this once and you'll get immediate results. Well, I talk a lot more about playing the long game. Are you willing to play the long game? You see, I work very much on the word willingness. Motivation is great, but motivation is an emotion. And when you're going through 10 years of daily struggle where every day you're in pain and you know you're going to fail with everything you try and do, and you know that people are going to laugh at you, for 10 years, to feel your motivation disappears. What lasts is habits. The habits of what you do in the morning, the habits of what you do when it's tough, the things that you continually do when you're failing, but you want to get above that failure. You want to be able to reach new heights. All of those sorts of things. And I working with people and myself constantly on what are my habits. Because if I'm thinking it, My brain is wanting to start a habit out of that thought. So I better watch what I'm thinking. I better be careful of what I'm doing. I better be careful of what it is that I'm bringing to other people, because that's how they're going to start working on building a habit out of it. So the willingness is the biggest issue with me. Okay, you can be taught. A lot of people are really struggling, but they have all the education in the world and there's training readily available to it, and they attend. But it's not the training or the education or your emotional. To me, it's all about the fact of, are you willing? Are you willing to do it? And are you willing to do it knowing that you're probably going to get it wrong this time? And after you do it wrong this time, are you willing for us to look at it and assess it and see how you can do it better? And are you willing to try again? Are you willing to question everything you've ever thought? Are you willing to start again if you need to? Are you willing to go back to somebody who once helped you a long time ago? And whatever, it always comes back to willingness.
Yeah.
Are you willing to do it when you know it's going to hurt for a long time until it starts to get better? Are you willing to play the long game? Very few, not everybody wants to hear that, but that's been my experience, and I can only talk from my experience. I can't talk about theories that other people have had. Doesn't mean they're wrong. They could be right, but just from the way that I've experienced it, I know that I've got this life because I've earned it. I've worked for a long period of time, failed so many times on everything, especially speech. Speech took me a decade until I could wrap my mind around wrap it around actually speaking properly, which was, funnily enough, I just said that really badly.
Because you were focusing on it, right?
Yeah. But that's it. I've played the long game, and everyone that I meet who is super successful at something, whether it be sport or business or making money or playing a musical instrument, whatever, they all tell me about the long game they played.
Yeah.
How they did something every day. Their habit was that a particular part of every day they did this.
Yeah.
They made sacrifices. Instead of doing that, they did that. It's the long game, and the short, immediate thing. A lot of people get stuck because they feel like they deserve. Yeah. Well, you deserve the right to work hard. And not everyone agrees with me on that. I've had a lot of arguments with people, but that's okay. Yeah. You have the right to disagree with me, and we can still be friends. That's all right.
Yeah.
But, you work hard. If you want it, you earn it. If you don't earn it, you won't get it. If you do get it, you'll lose it. You won't be able to get it back again because you don't know how you got it the first time. Yeah. So to me, that's the human condition, and that's the way that we go.
Wonderful. All right. And so you obviously you launched your book. When did you launch your book? 2000?
A long time ago, 2010.
10. That's it. I've got so many in front of me now.
There's going to be there's going to be an updated version.
I was going to ask you about that. Yes. Why do you feel that the time is right now for a bit of a revision and an update?
When I first wrote my book, I wrote my book in 6 weeks.
That's pretty epic.
Yeah, because that's what I tend to do. I tend to say, right, I'm going to do this, and I just do that until I get it finished. And when I wrote my book, I actually didn't think that anybody was going to read it. The only reason I wrote it was because I calculated that about 10,000 people had asked me to write a book.
Right.
I used to write a book about your story. Yeah. Or, do you have a book? If you had a book, I'd buy it, Steve. I thought, okay, well then, all right. It's embarrassing talking about all the things that I went through, but I'll write the book. There you go. So if you ask me about my story in the future, I'll just be able to say, here, read this. Yeah. That was my thought. But and because it was 6 weeks, because I had booked Broncos Leagues Club, one of the league clubs in Brisbane, a very big leagues club, a wonderful club, wonderful team. I had sold out that place, and I hadn't even written a word. Oh, wow. I hadn't figured out a title. I hadn't figured anything, because that was that's what I often do. I'll put out this big invitation, And then I write it. And then I put it in the big invitation. I got all these people saying, yeah, I'll come. And I thought, oh, what am I going to write? So when I wrote it,
Wow.
so when I wrote it, it was very fulfilling to me to actually put all of my thoughts into actual words and sentences. I remembered a lot more that I had forgotten, but it wasn't until I was writing it, until my mind said, remember that. Also, the pain of sitting in a chair for 16, 17, 18 hours a day, every day for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
The pain, as they say, is true. Pain has memory. And I started to remember an awful lot of stuff that was coming through what I knew was my pain. And all of a sudden, I finished this book and I gave it to some people, and the response from those people was really positive. And I thought, okay, well, I've run out of time now anyway. I've got to print it, so I may as well print it. And as a result, there's a couple of typos in there. But there's one major thing that I left out of that book, which was how I tried to take my own life. I left that entire section out. And I left it out because I didn't want to inspire someone to do it. I thought, no, that's not why I wrote this book. I wrote this book, and the only person I'm going to point any fingers at is me. The only person I'm going to make fun at is me.
Yeah.
No one else. And then when I started thinking about that, I started to blur those lines and thought, no, I'm leaving it out. I don't want to be responsible, or I don't want someone else to read it and think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
So I didn't include it. And then I started speaking at a lot of Are You OK days. And I would share that story saying, I don't usually share this story, but I'm going to tell you. And then people would go and buy the book. And then I would get all these emails and phone calls saying, Steve, we just attended this thing about you doing this, and we bought your book and it's not in here.
Yeah.
And he's saying, would you? Yeah, well, that's why I bought the book, to find out about that. And I said, okay. And so I gave them those same lame excuses, and they would say, Stephen, if people are reading your book, it means that they don't want to do it. Your book is about survival. It's about endurance. It's about solution. It's about all of those issues. So if anybody feels that way when they start reading your book, you're going to talk them out of it. But you've got to have that story in your book. So I thought, okay, I'll wait for a little while, and then I'll add that story in, which adds a lot more about the depression things in the mental health side. But I'll also fix up a few typos, which hardly people don't even notice. They don't even know. And if they do notice and they ask me, they say, did you do that on purpose, Steve? And
just make sure you were taking notice.
Yeah. Well, I know. And someone once said to me, "Is it because you've had a brain injury that you purposefully misspelled words?" And I just went, "Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's because I've got a brain injury. You see, that's my perfect excuse for everything.
Yeah.
Oh, brain injury. If I don't want to do work around the house, my back is sore. I've got every excuse that everyone.
You realise this is on the record now, right?
They all know it. No one falls for it. Actually, no one has ever fallen for it.
Yeah.
But so I'm just going to write an updated version, but a lot more about mental health and a lot more about the things that are more topical and more necessary today than they probably were in 2010.
Yeah.
Or at least as far as I knew. I'm very aware of it now because it's something that comes in with, even when I'm working with a lot of corporations and a lot of businesses, they're saying that. They're talking to me about mental health, mental strength, mental toughness, mental resilience. They're talking about, and those are the very big areas these days, and I understand why. And I've spent a long time doing programs of the actual reality behind them, instead of a lot of the stuff that's just, to me, isn't that meaningful. There's a lot of stuff out there about it, which to me, there's a lot of areas out there that trivialize mental health or trivialize your reason. And people aren't weak. They aren't stupid. They aren't trivial. They aren't flippant. There are some things at play that make people start to think of things in a very dark way. And I've really been interested into what are they? And so I have got some programs, and there's some controversial stuff in there, and there's some challenging stuff in there. But from what I do and the people that I've spoken to, and I've been educated by so many people who've sat down and had a coaching session with me or a coaching series with me, and have given so much of themselves to what we're talking about, and shared so much with me that I'm thinking, wow, I never even knew that. I did not expect those sorts of things. And I thought that a man or a woman in your position, I didn't think those would be a problem.
Yeah.
But, so it's just something that is a real, I think the word is burden for me, because I've been down that road, and it's just, you just don't want to be going down the road. And no one wants to be depressed. No one wants to have those issues. Everyone is looking for a solution. And a lot of people are looking for a cure. I actually don't talk about a cure. I talk about being able to manage it, being able to manage those thoughts, because your brain, once it's had that thought, it's always there. Depression for me is only a couple of steps away. I don't have to work really hard to be depressed. I could easily go down that road, but I've got to manage to keep going down the right road. And then every now and again, when I slip off, I got to have practices ready, and I got to have habits that can bring me back onto the road that I want to be on, onto the right highway instead of the wrong one. And these are little tricks that really help me and have really helped the people that I've worked with. But it's not all about depression. It's just a lot of it's about how am I going to keep my business going with all this AI and all this robotics, and what are we going to do about customer service and culture with all this sort of stuff. So a lot of it is to do with that.
Yeah. Excellent. Sounds like it's going to be quite an upsize for the book, really, isn't it?
Well, I'll make sure I write it until we have a launch for it.
Yeah, that's right.
I try and learn from my mistakes if I can.
There's not many people that could say they could sell out a venue like that for their first launch, so I wouldn't call that a mistake. So.
Oh well, it's done very well, and a lot of copies have been sold, which have been great. And I started talking about it before, and I went off on some tangent, but that's the other thing. There were two things I was saying that I really enjoy. One is when someone comes back to me after a long time, of doing something with me. But the other one is when I get comments from people around the world about my book.
Yes.
I mean, you've read some of those comments from the link that I sent.
Yes.
But when people that I don't know email me or phone me and say, "Look, Stephen, I want to tell you what your book has done for me," those are things that sort of like that whole issue, flow for cliff. See, this is what it means. This is what it comes to. See, if I didn't have that, I wouldn't have been able to assist that person with this, or that person would have found it really difficult to get through certain things. And when fathers call you and say, "Look, you don't know me, but because I've read your book, I now understand my son, and I get on better with my son because I've read your book." And I'm thinking, how is that even possible? But I don't argue with them. I just say, well, great.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Where did you get my book from? They say, "Oh, someone gave it to me from someone who bought it." Or, it's usually 4 or 5 removed. A lot of people have borrowed my book.
That's a lot of readers, though, still.
So. A lot of people hand out my book.
Yeah.
Which is great. It's just, as I was told by the publisher, that once you start a book, Stephen, it'll live its own life. You've just got to let it go.
Yeah.
So mistakes and all, there you go. There you have it.
Yeah. Excellent. That's great. And so what do you have sort of lined up for yourself next year, 2019? Obviously, we're looking at 2.0 of the book, but do you have any other major projects or things that you're working towards?
Yeah, and if I can share this with you, Roxanne, that would be wonderful.
Yeah.
I have been working on something for a couple of years now for people who have a brain injury, be it through an accident, through a TBI, a traumatic brain injury, or an acquired brain injury, or stroke, or whatever it might be. I've been working on all the habits that I learned and that I learned after the event, but all the things that made a difference to me in trying to get the most out of a life that I'd almost thrown away or that had almost been damaged. And I found that when I was going through my recovery and I needed some assistance, there wasn't anybody who had actually gone through it, who had actually prepared something thorough that could really have helped me, because I wanted to learn from someone who'd actually done it, who'd had a brain injury of such extent that their life was almost wiped out. But through a lot of things and a lot of different habits and a lot of failures and a lot of successes over a period of time, they came out the other side. And I wanted to find out that. And there are a lot of things available, especially on social media, of groups that are helping each other. But I'm still finding the thing that I'm working on is still yet to really be released. Something that also helps therapists who are helping someone with a brain injury. But if the therapist has never had a brain injury, there's a lot of things about helping about helping their client, helping the person that they can't do. And to me, because I lectured at university for 5 years on this leadership through communication, and one of the issues, and the first thing that I raise is that me being a man, I would never know the pains of childbirth. So me telling a woman all about the pains of childbirth, they're going to look at me like, you have no right to tell me that.
Yeah.
But if I said, oh yes, but I'm a gynecologist, I've got a PhD in obstetrics, I've delivered 1,000 babies, I've got all of this, even still, I wouldn't know anything about the pains of childbirth. If I was a woman and I wanted to find out, I'd go to another woman who'd given birth and said, tell me what it's really like.
Yeah.
You want to get somebody on the inside track who's actually really experienced it and can understand all the failures, all of the problems that you have inside your own broken brain trying to sort it out, but you can't because your brain is broken.
Yeah.
There's something that has affected your thinking which gets in the way of you trying to figure things out. If you try and express it to somebody else, you can't express it because you're suffering aphasia or some other problem, which means that your ability to communicate is damaged. So all of a sudden, so I'm wanting to do something. I've worked out this program that's got 121 different habits in it.
Yeah.
Physically, mentally, emotionally, to really help people, but also something for the therapists to teach them all the stuff I did out at uni, to teach them about understanding what's going on inside that person's mind. And the third level, to help people who are a family member of someone who's had that issue.
Yeah. So a carer.
A carer or a family, because if the mother or the father has had a stroke, or the son or the daughter has had a brain injury from something, that changes the entire family. That changes the entire future of that family. That changes the dreams that they all had. There's so many pinball type effects, so many ripple effects that come from this one thing, where it's not just the individual, but everyone around them, their life changes. And I just wanted to be able to supply them with something, and then do the same things with people who've got depression and people who are struggling with mental health, because those are the things that I do understand to some extent. And I'm always asked what I think about certain things, and I present them and I talk about them. We run a lot of programs, and over the years, 100,000 people have come up and said, Steve, what would you do about this one thing? And to write that down, and there's something else that I can give. And even though I might not have actually experienced it, if the conversation helps. So that's my big project for next year, is releasing that and writing a series of books and free videos for people who struggle with that and can get help online for free from someone who's been through it and has come at the other side. But some people, with some brain injuries, they can't get through the other side. In which case you might be able to help their family.
Yeah.
So just trying to be of value, I think, Roxanne, trying to be of value and of worth, saying this event has led to something that helps other people. And that's really important to me.
Absolutely. Wow, that's going to be an epic year for you ahead. And yeah, your reach is you're going to help so many more people through those.
Well,
that's amazing.
There are lots of people around the world who feel exactly the same way and are doing their level best. And I see what they're doing, and that inspires me to do something. And I'm certainly not alone. I'm certainly not special. There's so many people trying to do something which benefits humanity, because a lot of people feel, as I do, that humanity is under attack at the moment. And so we're just doing something about it. And that's all you need to do. Just do something about it.
Absolutely. Sound words there. I think that's the perfect ending. So you've done that well.
And look at what you're doing, Roxanne. You're doing something. You're doing this. You're interviewing people like me, and I've seen some of the other people and some of their incredible stories. You're doing that to put that out there, to say, hey, who else would like to find out about these particular things from these people who've been through hardships?
Yeah.
So you're doing exactly the same, just in a slightly different way.
Yeah,
so
thank you.
So congratulations for what you're doing as well.
Thank you. That's really lovely. I wasn't expecting that.
Well, there you go. See, you're doing something great as well, and I know that it's difficult to get going and to get momentum, but if you keep doing it and you keep sending things out there, it will increase the chance of it happening.
Yeah.
And so you just continue putting more out there, because you might only change the life of one person, and that's worth it.
Yeah.
It's all for one person. When you're speaking, there's just one person in that room, even if there's 5,000 people or 20 people in that room.
Yeah.
It's just one person who might need to hear something from you that makes all the difference. Yeah. And that's what it's all about.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for all of your time. We've had you for a fair bit today, so I appreciate your time. Yeah.
Just wait until I send you an invoice. Wow, that would just be.
That wasn't in the contract. Hang on.
No, I assume you're paying for this. Yeah, right.
Yeah, excellent.
No, my pleasure. Thank you so much for asking me.
Not a problem at all. And for all of you who have been watching and listening in, I will have links below to Stephen's website if you wanted to reach out and get in touch or get your hands.
That's just to let you know. That's the other thing. There's going to be a new website soon, because the website they get to at the moment is out of date and has not been updated for a while. So there'll be a new one that comes out soon. But if you contact me, I'll send you the links.
Okay, perfect. There you go. You've heard it from the man himself.
Yeah, you have.
Yeah. And excellent. And make sure that you we'll sit tight. We'll let you know when the 2019 revised version of Bouncing Back When You Hit Rock Bottom is out and about, ready to buy. So also, if you wanted to keep following us, I believe actually, Stephen, you've rounded up season 1 of the Phoenix Phenomenon, so you're our very last speaker for this season. So yes, anyone who wants to watch back, we'll have them all up on YouTube. You can reach them through my website. Also, like and subscribe so that when season 2 hits, you're ready to go as well for our next batch of amazing inspirational speakers. So thank you so much, and thank you again, Stephen.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.